probably get alive. What's that? You're it's full for it right now.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Board of Examining Plumbers, City of Oneonta, Thursday, November 18th, 2021, 4:05 p.m., meeting in the Common Council chambers. Roll call, please.
Chair back.
Here.
Councilman Examiner Rankovich.
Here.
City Administrator Matthijs.
Here.
Code Enforcer Yearly.
Here.
Okay, nobody gets hurt, or is it?
Approval of the minutes of September 14th, 2021. I assume everybody's had a chance to review. Any concerns, corrections? Hearing none, we'll accept the minutes. Any correspondence?
No.
Old business? New business is looking for applications for exemption of 2 potential master plumbers. First is Joe Estani. Did you provide any documentation other than the statement that you sent?
We have about 32 pages between the 2 applicants, summarizing their experience, other licensures that they may or may not.
So the important thing with this is we don't have a current master's license for these guys. So none of them currently hold, other than the Glens Falls license, a master's license. I tracked down Charles Purcell. Yeah, okay, yeah. So I verified his employment with Chris Fuley Brothers Plumbing. So he was actively working under a master's license in Albany. So I mean, Charles by himself could sit the exam. He meets the exam requirements of working under a master plumber. He also has the master's license from the state of Virginia, their requirements. I mean, I verified he was a master plumber in Virginia. The license is not current though. So like for us to exempt someone, we would have to have a current license. Or they would have to show 20 years of experience, or there's a couple of things that they can do to meet the exemption requirement if they're not, we're not just waiving the exam. Like if they were licensed as a master plumber, we could choose to exempt them from sitting the exam. If they had 20 years of experience as a plumber with affidavits to back it all up, we could theoretically exempt the exam. You know, there's a couple ways to go. At least with Charles, I know that he meets the testing requirement, but it would be, you know, we'd have to look to see if we wanted to exempt him from the exam.
So his application was for exemption, not for taking the exam.
Okay.
I'm asking.
I mean, we could obviously just tell him that he needs to sit the exam. I mean, I don't.
I mean, they asked for both. Their cover letter says, hey, we've submitted enough experience to be able to grant that exemption, but the ending of that sentence was, or at least the courtesy of sitting for the examination. So, we would also like to formally request that consideration be given to granting a plumbing license in the city of Oneonta based on our extensive experience, or be given an opportunity to take the examination.
Thank you. So starting with Mr. Gustati, I'm not seeing enough documentation to warrant the exemption or to be allowed to sit for the exam.
Greg Scotty.
Joe.
Joe.
Gregory is the company owner.
Okay.
Joe is the one that was the project management for it.
Comments?
Okay. And the other thing I had here is, so Joe lists his experience under Richard Casati. The city of Troy has like, I've tried to track down some of this licensing information. They're basically like, we don't have records that go back to verify the license. So all they can tell me is they don't currently have a license in Troy. But they said that that doesn't mean they didn't have a license in Troy. That just means they currently don't hold a license in Troy. With that said, Troy currently has a similar test to ours. It has a similar like setup of what it's testing on and 100 questions, the whole.
So is Gregory the same person as Joe?
No.
Gregory is the owner of the company who had initially applied for consideration for either reciprocal license or exemption from the exam. He was found to not at all meet the requirements necessary.
Right. But again, he's got this, I worked under this Richard Gasati, who he provides a license number for. The city of Troy is just like, we don't maintain our records on trades licensing. Apparently back to 2010. I mean, so.
Which is similar to Albany. The guy passed the exam with an 87 for a master in Albany, but Albany didn't have recognition.
Right. Again, not because of this person, but because Albany's like, we just don't keep our records that far back. So my kind of thought on this was, it seemed reasonable to let them sit the exam based on the fact that they're saying that they were master plumbers. The municipality is the one who's saying, well, we don't have a database, which seems insane.
And they can't provide any documentation themselves.
Well, we could request. I mean, I kind of requested from the municipalities because I thought that'd be the first place to go, being that they're the ones issuing licenses. And I feel like our municipality could provide that, you know. So all I could verify was the state licenses, and I could verify the employment under Crucifilla Brothers. So Charles was the easiest one because I could verify all of his information.
And not to jump around, Gregory Gasati's resume, first page of resume. He's a master plumber's license number 232, city plumbing call.
Yeah, unfortunately, their test is when we inquired about that, their test is 10 questions, true or false. They don't have a plumbing inspector. I mean, it's lacking. So Gregory, if you go into his application, he's like, well, I did work under master plumber for 6 years. But the city of Troy is like, well, our records, if you ask for a master plumber that held a license there in 2004, they'll tell you, well, he's not currently licensed, so we don't know. So it's just kind of
So correct me, right now, we're looking at the application for Joe as an exemption.
So I'm not recommending you exempt anyone. What I would say is that based on the information that we have, I think that you could argue that Joe, Greg, and Charles all would meet the requirements to sit the exam. They're also at least some time working under a master's plumber. None of them hold a current master's license. None of them have, I think it's like 10 years of experience plus. I just want to get to the page so I can tell you guys the exact exemption requirements.
From the city?
Yep. So let's see. So if you want to be exempted from the plumbing exam, Okay, so here we go. So this is restricted license, unlicensed contractors and contractors licensed by their entities. Okay, so. Establish satisfaction plumbing board plumbers that he or she has completed at least 10 full years of full-time work or the equivalent over a longer period of time in any of the fields, blah, 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 blah. And attendance at certification from an accredited school of plumbing and HVAC training. The exemption requirements will be waived. So none of these guys show any sort of, none of them are like a mechanical engineer or any sort of educational. So they might have worked for 10 years, but they don't meet the education requirement. The second one is they established 20 years of full-time work or equivalent over a longer time. So that none of these guys have 20 years of, it doesn't appear that they have 20 years. I mean, maybe Joe, maybe.
Doesn't the applicant have the responsibility of showing us the documentation to meet the requirements of this section,
Right.
rather than throwing it at us?
So, and that's what I'm saying. So with Charles, I think that's been met because he provided us with the card. I verified the card. I verified his employment with. I verified his employment as a courtesy to the board. He's like, I worked there. I checked up on his claim. He did work there. He was licensed in Virginia. So Charles, I think, has met that requirement.
If we may, let's look at one application at a time.
Okay.
And get them knocked out. So the first one is Joe. I'm not seeing the documentation we need and the credentials. So his application for exemption, in my opinion, has to be denied. Other comments? Mike? You're okay? Steve, do you agree?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm making a motion to deny the application for exemption for Joe Decided. Need a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, please.
Chair Patrick,
The motion is to deny the application, correct?
correct.
Yes.
Mike Ronkovich,
Yes.
Stephen Early,
Yep.
and Greg Mattias.
Yes.
So the application of exemption is denied. Moving on to the next, Charles Purcell. We sure have loaded us with paperwork. Not seeing the need of what we need based on our code requirements. One of the concerns I have here is other people who take the exam have been required to provide that information. Nothing has changed in a while as far as the requirements go. I would think if the applicant is looking for an exemption or looking to sit for the exam, it becomes their responsibility to give us the materials that we need based on the city requirement. If not, we're chasing, perhaps misinterpreting. And I think if that's the case, they need to be here to represent themselves. If not, we have to take their documentation at face value. Comments, agreement, disagreement?
Agree that we need to have sufficient documentation of their experience, I think. Are we talking about Charles Purcell?
I think we're talking general, going to Charles. So anyone who comes before the board should have the same set of requirements, same set of documents, and it should become their obligation to provide them.
Correct.
We shouldn't have to chase after them.
Yeah.
The city code is written, they can refer to that. I believe in the application, they are asked to look at those sections of the code.
Right.
If they choose not to or can't, it may not even be necessary for it to come before the board. That's my take on it. And again, we have to be fair to everyone who stands in front of us. That's my take. Uniformity. So in the case of Charles Purcell, once again, he's asked in his application for an exemption. His boss has asked that if you can't, maybe we can take the test. So the application is for exemption. Correct. We don't have enough documentation to justify that. So it's my position that the application for exemption once again becomes denied for lack of data. Make a motion that the application for exemption for Charles Purcell be denied. Second.
Second.
Vote please.
That the application for exemption due to lack of data for Charles Purcell be denied for exemption. Chair Beck,
Yes.
Mike McCovish,
Yes.
Steve Yearly,
Yes.
Greg McKenzie.
So the next question, so the application is denied. The next exercise, do we as a board want to look for alternatives to give them the opportunity to take the exam? Or do we throw that burden back to the person who wants to exam?
I mean, what would we be looking, so like, in the case of, I'll stick with Charles, what would we be looking for an exam requirement? I mean, would we want pay stubs, or what, I mean, what are we?
Well, it goes back to the section of our code, 8 years of full-time work experience or equivalent over a longer period of time. We have defined a work year as 1,500 hours. So if he's going to work under section A, we would need to see that. Or 6 years in attendance to an accredited school.
Correct.
We would need to see pay stubs as well as paperwork showing that they went through the system. Just as the candidates for the last session we had were able to provide that. They did not provide it at the meeting. So they had to provide it after that in order to be accepted. The third is 8 years schooling or 12 years full-time. And they've not been able to provide any of those things. I'm not saying they don't have them, but they haven't provided. Agreement or disagreement with the concept?
So, yeah, I just want to, I agree with the concept, I just want to make sure that we articulate exactly what we're looking for.
The articulation of what we're looking for is in the city code.
Right.
The same code reference that was given to them for the application.
Right.
If they would like to argue that, they have the opportunity to,
Correct.
but they can't leave that burden to us. That's my opinion. And anyone who comes through and sits to take the exam or look for an exemption should uniformly have to provide the same stuff. You shouldn't have to take your time to go chase. I think that's unfair to your office. And that's a responsibility that's not necessarily yours. It's our obligation to vet that information and to confirm it. You shouldn't have to chase it.
You know, they should provide what it says in the code, which says that they shall provide name, addresses, telephone numbers of persons, business institutions, capable of verifying the integrity of said documents. I don't see that Charles Purcell provided those, however, I guess in this case we did. Did we manage to verify?
Yeah, and that's the only thing I was throwing out there is that I did because his application was probably the most complete and the easiest to verify, that was all verified. He was working under Crisafullo Brothers for the amount of time he said he was as a full-time plumbing worker. And he was licensed by the state of Virginia as a master plumber for the amount of time that he said he was licensed as a master in Virginia. I'm assuming that he probably did something in the Navy which enabled him to sit the exam, the Virginia master's license. But so I verified those two employment facts about Charles Purcell because those were the easiest to verify.
Are you willing to verify all future applications?
I'm not saying I am. That was done, I think the board said there was an email sent out that said, did we vet any of this? And I took it upon myself to do
They
that.
sent that out.
Okay.
I would think in any case, if, we should ask and make it clear in the future, like provide names, telephone numbers, whatever, all that stuff, so that we don't have to go track it down. But then once they provide those names, numbers, we will be calling and verifying their work experience.
Which is kind of what I treated this as, was a,
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't want to get hung up on the process that should have happened and how it happened a little differently. I think the end result was we did verify their work experience. If that is sufficient, personally, I wouldn't want to hold up a process.
I think there's a simple solution to this, is we just go back to the applicant and say, you need to provide us with affidavits of, if that's what we want, if that's what the code says, then we should just go back to them and say, pending you providing us with that material to show that you meet that code section.
But that's given to them when they apply in the first place, right? That information?
The application references the section and it lists the years of experience that they need to provide.
Okay, so it was there. It's not like it's something we're just bringing up.
Right, so that's what I'm saying.
So then that's what I'm saying. That should have been, if you're trying to get into this, you need to have that all provide, bring it with you.
I see what's lacking is, so you provided a master's license that's since expired, to cover the 4 years that he's working for himself. That's 4 years experience work as an owner of a business, and employing with his own as a master. And then there is the Crisafullo Brothers, where he was a plumber, and we were able to verify it with a plumber. What he did not provide was an email address or a phone number or address for that company. We found it, looked it up. And that's 4 years full-time. Was that doing plumbing work full-time? And he got company and so they weren't doing other things.
No, yeah, they verified he was a full-time plumber.
So that's 8 years that I think has been verified. It is, I guess maybe I have to step back, is the now expired license from Virginia. Do we consider that a verified?
So that's the thing with, our code will allow us to exempt based on the fact that he's holding a license from it lists like state, municipality, but it's expired. So we can say he had 4 years of experience as a master plumber in Virginia, which is verifiable, but it doesn't exempt him because he no longer holds a license.
Right, and I'm not suggesting we should exempt them, but just that, are we on the same page that 4 years, we consider that to be 4 legitimate years of plumbing experience based on the fact that he was a master plumber during those 4 years, and he worked for himself. Well, it's 2010. Just as in, if someone were going the route of providing 12 years of full-time work experience or equivalent over a longer period of time working independently as a plumber, I guess it would be difficult to check a reference.
Well, I think that's the point of having an affidavit that shows W-2s and hours worked. And so I guess the question then becomes like, do we go back to them and say we need additional information and give them the code section again? And
To have them sit in for a test.
or if they still think they meet the exemption, to provide the whatever material they think shows that. I mean, I think we're still talking about the same application. We're talking about they want to either be exempted or sit the exam. So we say we need additional information, and you said it.
So to expedite the process, As a courtesy, do we offer sitting for the exam once the necessary documentation has been provided?
I mean, I think that that's a reasonable request. I mean, I feel like we've done things like that with like other boards. We say, look, we reviewed your application. We think that you need to provide some additional information. Pending that, we can all review it. And then we can offer the exam.
You agree with that? Let's turn that into a motion. That's how I feel that.
Fine, if you need me to repeat myself in 3 different ways, I can.
Provide documentation of training for.
Per code section, you can just include the,
210-7, something.
And then I can say, or, we're gonna let them sit for the exam. But if you'd like to be exempt, you have to provide this.
Okay, exemption is in section 210-8.
but we've kind of decided that based on this application, they don't meet the exemption requirement. But if they feel that there's something we're missing,
Then they should
the
reapply.
onus is them.
I'm not sure I would like that included in the motion.
Okay.
The reason being that we are doing this as a courtesy, not trying to set precedent. In reality, we are. Well, let's address one topic at a time.
So.
Well, we've already
210
voted to deny the exemption. So any request for an exemption would be a new application,
Yes.
providing the sections and
You're okay, you can use just B, because that's the overarching
For the exemption.
for the, no, this is for the exemption of.
You good?
To provide documentation of training per code section 210-7B for examination.
And the motion will include the approval of their request to sit in the exam pending the receipt of these documents.
Yes.
And I guess the next question would be, would we have special meetings and then review additional paperwork?
So if you're telling us exactly what they need to provide, then we can say they've provided it and they've met the requirements. So if you say we want, 1,500 times however many years, hours worth of this, or a combination thereof of that and experience. I mean, it just says it has to be certified verifiable documents. I mean, or signed or notarized. There's 3 separate kinds. So just whatever you want us to verify, well,
Yeah, so that's all the code section.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So if you tell us what requirements or criteria,
which we did by citing the code section.
Right.
Right, okay.
We should not have to sit to review those.
correct.
We could review those via email and just.
You could say that you feel that they meet. Yes, you could agree with us. You can't make a decision.
That takes the burden totally off your shoulders.
Yeah, because honestly, I'd be taking that information and saying, hey, Steve, what do you think?
And I would look at it and say either meets the code or it doesn't.
Right.
It's either a sworn affidavit or whatever, or it's not.
So they could have paycheck stubs, right?
Right, that's what it would
They could
be.
have a letter from the boss stating that they work for them that was notarized
W-2s.
or W-2s, okay.
Is everyone comfortable with the motion on the table?
Yes,
Yes.
we're gonna do what the code says.
Who would like to make that motion?
I will make the motion.
I'll second it.
I feel like I have an obligation to make that motion.
No, just 3 days.
Chair Bag,
Yes.
Mike Rinkovich,
Yes.
Steve Roney,
Yes.
Greg Mattias.
Yes.
Any other things we need to go over for your meeting?
I in fact do have some new business real
Can
quick.
I interrupt you before you move on to new business? I know, I'm sorry. Does that previous motion apply only to Purcell because of the application he presented, or are we giving that same courtesy to Joe Jasai?
It is for Purcell.
Purcell only, okay, thank you.
Okay. We had a sprinkler contractor from Syracuse contact us about his intent to do a bid proposal for the 4 block. Syracuse has a sprinkler fire suppression license as well. They administer a municipal test. You're allowed to sit that exam if you meet a certain amount of time of service time. NICET 3 is a way to reduce the amount of service time needed to sit the exam. So for NICET 3 certified, I think it reduces the time served requirement by 5 years to sit their municipal exam. So a NICET 3 certified individual could theoretically just sit the exam and be issued a fire suppression license. If you're not NICET 3, you have to be time working under a master or someone who's licensed in the city of Syracuse. This individual has and has had a city of Syracuse fire suppression license, and he is wanting to know if he reciprocate or would reciprocate a fire suppression license from Syracuse to Oneonta. His question was based on the fact that we do reciprocate plumbing licenses or exempt based on other state municipal licenses, et cetera. And I told him I would inquire with the board how they wanted to deal with that or look at that.
The way I see it, we don't have a reciprocal agreement with Syracuse,
Okay.
so we couldn't reciprocate the license. When you had pulled something out of the code for,
So the question that I just have is, we have that allowance in the code. That's what Sullivan Fire requested. I'm asking the board, do we want this individual to come in and follow a similar course and present their qualifications, licensing? Basically, I just need to know what to discuss with this individual, or if I should just tell them to provide a complete application of credentials to the plumbing board.
unfortunately, my position on that is until the city managers and mayors have an agreement, we don't even have the option of viewing a reciprocal agreement. That's not
Right.
in our,
So I'm probably going to have this individual come to the board then for some sort of exception, or so I can't approve him to be issued a license or to even issue him a permit. So the only way we could theoretically do the work in Oneonta is with the approval of the plumbing board. So I guess my intent will then be that if he requests it, I'll have him come in front of the board and you guys can review his proposal, his plans, just like we did with Sullivan, and follow that precedent.
same thing. And I assume, just like Sullivan, it would be a one-time
Yep.
permit.
We couldn't issue a license. I just want to kind of give the board the backstory of how this individual came to be.
Does everyone agree that's consistent with what we've been doing?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
210A, sub 4, notwithstanding any other provisions of this section where an applicant for a fire suppression contractor license establishes to the satisfaction of the Board of Examining Plumbers that the applicant has proof of at least 8 years of full-time work experience in the fire suppression field, or a combination of equivalent experience in education with affidavits supporting such qualifications, as well as a current and valid NICET 3 certification in either water-based system layout or inspection and testing.
So the issue that we have is I don't think he's nice.
He doesn't have 3. Oh,
His deal is, he's like, the city of Syracuse has always offered this fire suppression exam. It mirrors the NICET exam. If you're NICET 3 certified, you can alleviate the number of years required to sit the exam. He's like, I sat the exam, I'm licensed, but I'm not licensed. So it's kind of like a switcheroo
Doesn't that
with us.
fall under
sub 1 then.
F1,
Yeah,
so that says, you want to read? Yeah, okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
Unless the applicant fire suppression contractor license establishes to the Board of Examining Plumbers satisfaction that the applicant holds a current license from another state or political subdivision thereof, or from the state of New York or any political subdivision thereof, which license was issued on the basis of a qualifying examination. The Board of Examining Plumbers shall have the power to waive the written examination at its discretion.
So in this case, we could review his license.
So if we don't have an examination for fire suppression, we just go based on the NICET.
Correct.
So we would have to deem that Syracuse's examination is
In fact, similar to the.
similar to the NICET, which is what you're saying, that it's based on that.
That's my understanding of it, but I mean, I still, the board's gonna have to review whatever application it brings out. Because that's all the information I have is I contacted the city of Syracuse and got a rundown of their fire suppression licensing program and like how it's. But again, it's a closed test, so they won't really go into what.
So he has to bring us documentation on how long he's been doing this and
How long he's been licensed.
right, how long he's been licensed, how long he's been doing it, and we have to go from there.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with that.
I mean,
Once again, provide documentation.
Okay. That's all my new business.
Sure.
I mean, I got a lot of stuff. That's the only plumbing related business I have.
Anything else anybody would like to bring to the table? Right? Steve? Rich? Meeting adjourned.